Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. We're today we're looking at Chapter 5 of Book 7. Again, the best regime. Uh, we're looking at the best regime. Last time we dealt the question of size of the city, both in terms of the size of the people and the territory, and the quality of the people. Size and quality. These things of both of people, the people in question, and the land, right? The territory that inhabits it. And it's a whole question of size, right? Now we're going to chapter 5, where he mostly dealt with the question of size of population, right? Now he's going to do the same. He's going to say right where it is. Something similar holds as well in what it concerns to territory. So therefore, the size it seems to be the size of the population. But he made the argument that if the population is too big, too many people, it's not going to be good. It's be the right size, the right amount. Well, the same thing with property, land, territory. He says that this is what is true about people is also true about being too big and too large. As far as it's being of a certain quality, it is clear that everyone would praise the territory that is the most self-sufficient, so therefore that is able to provide for itself, the most able to have resources and the capacity that doesn't need anything, right? That which bears every sort of thing of necessity such. In other words, that which bears every sort of thing is of necessity. The city needs, a political community needs, for self-sufficiency, is having everything available and being in need of nothing, right? An extent and size of a territory, the territory should be large enough so that the inhabitants are able to live at leisure in a fashion of free men, and at the same time with moderation. In other words, they must be the size that the territory allows them to have enough resources, have enough. Therefore, they have enough to feed themselves and live in moderation, not be poor, not be bad. The land must be a certain size that you must be able to have, that everyone can have a certain amount of land or a certain amount that they can enjoy it, that they can have enough of resources, that they are not without resources, or that they don't have so much resources that they live in excess. Okay, this idea here. They live in leisure of a fashion of a free man, at the same time, but with moderation. Whether regarding this defining principle we are arguing finally or not must be investigated with greater precision later, when there will be an opportunity to give an account of acquiring property and what is involved in being well off in terms of possessing it. How and what manner should this relate to its use? Now, the extent here to 23, this leaves us that weird question. Aristotle's perhaps thinking the size of territory individuals' holdings, right? The awkwardness of the translation here, and the fact that the question of quality of territory is not clearly exhausted. It appears to be returned 2 and 3 and 4, right? Suggests that something may be omitted here. Something must be missing here. Uh, at 24, right, this, at chapter 23, 24, this is regarding Artos and Autan for the manuscript with Ross and Kraut. Right? There's no discussion of this kind in the remainder of the politics we have it. And the meaning there, therefore, is uncertain. So therefore, we have this weird thing right here, right? He says, we're going to have a discussion of this. Well, he doesn't have a discussion. So therefore, we get what we get here. Maybe we should though, right? The question of, well, what happens about property? How should we deal with the property? The question of how the plot of lands, or should this be about the initial plot of land that we get, or is this really more about the size of the land? Okay, so therefore, this is something that it's a very a weird thing. He says we're going to talk about it, but we don't talk about it. We don't get in the remaining of discussion of this. We don't get a discussion of this. So he says he's going to talk about it, but he doesn't. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it, or there's no need to talk about it. There's no essential need, or is it? Or is there? Or is something wrong here? that we need to talk about it in that sense. That, or maybe this territory is not as an issue, as much of an issue as the size of the people, right? But it's about, again, this question of living finely. We have to remember what Aristotle says in Book 4, Chapter 11, about the danger of being too rich and too poor, right? The wealthiness leads to arrogance. If you have too much of everything, if you're too wealthy, too much abundant, too great, and you don't live, you command, you're arrogant, your hubris will demand like this and not be good, not be good for the city. As the poor are too slavish and too lacking and not sufficient. Again, in other words, the city cannot be the city. The reason, in other words, the city should be that the multitude has enough, has a mesos, that they have enough, that they're not the prior, the resources that they need, the necessity, the means that they live off of, should be enough for them. That they can live in moderately, with moderation. Sophosune, right? And he says, for there are many disputes in condition with the investigation account of those who invite us towards either sorts of excess in our way of our life. The ones towards pure need, and he's not having enough, or does towards luxury, right? Again, 25, this is that weird thing. This is a reference probably towards systems of laws and customs concerning property, the Spartan versus the Carthaginian, right? The two regimes. Remember what he says: the Carthaginians come out better in Aristotle's account of the thing than the Spartans do, right? But Aristotle may also have in mind the philosophic views, that of the Cynics and the Creionics, for example, Dionysius, these two thinkers, right? It could be not only about this distinction between Spartans who are Spartan and the Carthaginians who are luxurious, right? But also the question of the Cynics versus the critics who are the pleasure hunters, right? Um, this is that weird thing about here, that we have to be very careful here about this question, right? This is should we read, and again, remember what he says about in book 4, chapter 11, about the danger of poverty and lack of resources and the poor. This creates a bad character, slavishness, and the excess. They command. They're masters. They want to. They view everything master. So therefore, this moderation. You need moderation in that sense. You know, Adrian Croteau is always preaching moderation, and sometimes I kind of like take an exception to this because I don't think you can talk about moderation in a time of immoderation, right? But there is truth here that the ancient world thinks of moderation, that we should be moderate. But moderate does not mean this middle-minded. It means it is a peak. Moderation is a virtue, and all virtues are a kind of an excellent. It is a correct action. It's not an average. It's not a sorting out. Um, it's the right action. It's the right type of action in regards to pleasure, right? To pleasure and how much of it, to enjoyment and these things. It is enjoying to the right degree, right? That's what sophosune is. It's enjoying. It is the virtue, and this is Aristotle's ethics again. It is not just a so moderation means I don't enjoy things. No, that's pruning. That's denying of pleasure, and luxury is excessive pleasure, right? This middle ground, to have enough that you do this again. This idea of the middling sort, the mesos. This is it has to deal with the property also. There's just too much land. Does what? It can lead to a situation of aggregation, but too little land or too little territory, people fighting in conflict, right? So therefore, this is why we have to, and the quality of the land. What kind of land is it? Does it have enough resources? It has to have it has to have enough means prior that you are able to be you're able to live well, that they're able to be self-sufficient, right? Autarkos in that sense, right? It is not difficult to speak of this kind of territory regarding certain matters. One should also be persuaded by those who are experienced in having a problem here, sorry, in generalship, that it ought to be difficult for enemies to enter, but readily exited by the citizens themselves. And further, just as we asserted that the multitude of human beings should be readily surveyable, utopicus, to be able to see everything. That the territory too ought to be surveyable, being readily surveyable, easy to glance at, easy to look at. The territory is readily defended. If you can see it, you can observe it, you can defend it. In other words, this idea of the generalship. In other words, the territory should not only be able to be observed, you can see it, but also for the purpose of defense. That it's hard for people to come, easy to come in, but easy for the people to escape. Right? The multitude being readily surveillable. The multitude of human beings should be readily surveillable, but also territory should also be readily surveillable. Utopic, at a glance. Okay. If the position of the city is to be fixed according to what one would pray for, it is appropriate for it to lie beautifully in relation to both sea and land. It should it should not be away from sea, water, and land. It should be as close to water that it has enough water resources. It should be close to sea so that it can, but not too far. In other words, it should be if we should pray for it, just right amount of sea to a lot of land. Okay, right? Both the sea and land. One defining principle is that mention that the city should have access to all localities with a view to defensive sallies. In other words, all the areas in that should be to be able to be defensive. All the parts in the areas that allow for the city's defense should be accessible. Have access to. The city should have access to all the localities, places that with the view of defensive sallies, right? The remaining one is that it should be accessible with a view to the conveyance of crops, so that the crops can come in of as well, and further material for lumber. In other words, the resources, lumber, and that you should be able to get this. It should be designed so that you should have conveyance of crops and things is easy, and not difficult to do. Um, and any other products of this sort that the territory might happen to possess. So whatever it should have the excess of not only defense of the city, but also how resources are able to go to this to go into the city. It's crops, it's lumber, it's resources. This again defines how he ends the chapter about this, about the sizeness of the land, the territory, and the fittingness of the land. And this is how the fittingness of this. This is a very short chapter, so we should stop here. If you like any questions or issues you want to talk about, or anything you want me to address further, or you need some don't understand, please put a comment or a question, and when I see them, I respond to them. If you like the video, like it, share it, get other people to pass it, forward it on social media, send it out to people, post it around, encourage others to look at it, the video and the other videos. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Please subscribe. If you know other people who encourage, encourage others to subscribe, to come and watch and do this. Um, um, as you said, if you liked it, like it. If you didn't like it, put your comments, criticisms. I think maybe I can learn from you if I've done something wrong or said something incorrect. Or you think I made an error, or I could do better. That's right there. Um, you can follow me on social media if you want to follow me. I think the links are below. If you also the information below. If you want to help contribute me doing what I'm doing here, you can become a subscribe star, a Patreon. Okay, I understand I'm not that good at these things, and I'm late, and I understand, but it would help. I mean, this could you honestly could use a little bit of the money to help supplement teaching. Because teaching is inflation, man. Another thing you do if you want to help me, you can buy a book, buy my book, not my other books that I mentioned before. But this is if you buy this one, you help me out more because I'll get more money from it. It's a notebook on Aristotle's politics, a workbook. It is a study guide. It's not a commentary like my other books. It is kind of like a Cliff's Notes, where it is a study tool by which you can understand the politics. It looks at the politics book by book, chapter by chapter, offering kind of summaries, outlines, drafts, to understand the text a little bit and get a better grasp. Helps you get a better grasp of the text. and to get a better understanding of it. And it's a tool for students or those studying for that. So it's a useful tool in that sense. It's available at Amazon and Barnes and Noble and other online distributors. But if you want to give me the profit that they get, you buy it by Lulu. Of course, Lulu may not necessarily offer free shipping like those places might, but it will help. I will get the better stuff. But anyway, buy a copy. Buy it for a friend, a student who's going to be studying these things. This is what this is a perfect guide to study the text. On that, I hope you will see you again. We turn to chapter 6 next. We'll stop here and we'll thank you being with me and see you tomorrow. Next time we look at chapter 6. So have a good day. Take care. Bye bye.